What's good, guys? This is Vahography. I'm Vahagan, your rock and roll photographer, back at you with another video. Today we're going to test out the Nikon Z9's firmware update 2.1. We're in Bolsa Chica, California. We're going to do some birds. We're going to do some stills with the Nikon Z9. We're going to see how well the firmware update is with autofocus, tracking birds, all that good stuff. So come with me and let's rock and roll. I got my recorder. We're going to record the EVF and we're going to have some fun. Let's get started. Rock and roll. Before I left the house, I installed firmware 2.1 on my Z9. Do not shut off the camera, guys, while the camera is updating the firmware. The lens I'll be using today is the 600mm f4 FLE with the Pro Media Gear gimbal. The conditions were a little bit windy. No worries, I was going to be doing still photography for the most part, so that didn't really concern me. Next is figuring out what AF mode I want to use. More on that a little later. Now, I thought, I don't really need to shoot 20 frames per second, so I set continuous low on 10 frames per second, and then I switched from 20 to 10 throughout the day. So in this first example, we're watching the bird and the firmware promises tracking small objects. So here's an example of that. I'm at 600mm and you could see the separation from the background, the houses, and the bird. Here's an image cropped in. I decided to use the large area AF and then use the function button 1 to switch it to 3D tracking. I would pinpoint the subject, lock onto it using the AF button, and then switch it to 3D tracking and track the subject from there. I want to show you guys what firmware 2.1 on the Z9 can do with small subject, birds, and you name it. So here we go, large area AF. I'm pinpointing the subject using AF button and then switching it to 3D using my function button 1. As you can see, I'm panning the camera left to right and it's sticking on the subject with no problems. Here's an example of a shot I took in that sequence. Let's crop it in and see, nice and sharp and ready to go. On with the next examples. Sometimes things happen so fast, my finger wasn't on the function button, so I didn't have a chance to switch it to 3D, so I just started shooting. I had the AF on and just shooting it with wide area AF. And these next examples I want to show you, see I'm capturing the images as the action is flying by. Here are some examples of this sequence. I had my thumb on the AF on button the whole time of the sequence and it captured right in the center. And interesting shots here. Let me show you, let me crop it in here. It's sharp and you know what? I'm really liking these results. It was action, it was fast paced. Couldn't really compose the shot I wanted. However, luckily for me, it picked the right bird to have the focus. This is one of my favorites in the sequence. I love the sun hitting the bird on the side and it's dead on sharp. It's a nice little artistic image. Let's crop in here and show you. In this next example, the background with the people walking and the birds, the camera, the lens did an awesome job separating the two, reading the birds in the foreground, as you can see in that example. Once again, never fails, you always meet cool photographers while out and about, especially in this location. Took a few snaps of this fellow photographer, very cool guy. I talked to him. Here's an example of the autofocus. You tell me, did the focus grab the glasses or the eyeball? It's very close, but let's crop in and see. That's nice.
Yes.
Sony, Canons.
And this A9, it focuses great.
A9, huh?
Yeah, A9, it focuses great. It's sometimes even better than the DSLRs.
So you're using the 600 Canon lens?
Yeah, with the 2X.
2X. Nice, A9. What's your name?
You can call me DQ.
DQ.
Yes.
What's happening, DQ? Nice, nice. Haha, here's a bird up close. So, you want to see the autofocus? Firmware 2.1? Well, here you go. 3D animal IAF. Now the bird would turn back, turn to the side. As you can see, the focus is doing a good job tracking the eyeball. Sure, during times like this, the box would get larger, and then once the bird would turn, then it would start tracking once again. But right away, it would just grab on to the eyeball. A definite improvement. Let me sway the camera left to right. All in all, I think this sequence, the Z9 rocked it. Let me bring up an image. Here we go, a still image. Let's crop it in. Look at the detail and that sharpness. I know there's been talk about the 600 FL not being a Z lens. However, there's no issue with this lens. This is the top of the line 600mm FL lens that Nikon produces, and there is no issue with AF speed or AF tracking with this lens. The FTZ adapter worked like a charm, and fast, accurate readout. Here's another example shooting with vertically this bird. As you can see, guys, the tracking does a fine job. Wow, look at that eyelid and look at that detail. This is one of those vertical shots I just showed you. I'm cropped in heavily. How heavy? Well, here's the image, full without crop. Birds in the brush. Well, small objects. Here's an example of this bird hiding out in the vegetation there. And you see it does a good job tracking it. Let me take a still image for you in this scene, and there you go. Let's crop it in and see how sharp it is. What did I tell you, Thelma? Raise that shutter speed. Your images are blurry.
I'm using an old DSLR. You better get me the Z9.
So my wife sends me this picture. She's in Palm Springs. I sent her this picture while I was taking pictures. And then she sends me a picture of this beautiful bird and this beautiful backdrop in Palm Springs. I was like, man, I should be over there taking pictures. What kind of bird is that, folks? Leave me a comment. Here's some more examples. Recording the EVF while I was capturing these birds in flight. Is the Z9 firmware better than 2.0? Sure it is. Is it perfect? Of course it's not. No camera is perfect. Although the 2.1 did improve the performance, there's still a lot that I need to get used to. Here's some examples. Perfect lighting conditions, sharpness, I'm cropped in heavily, and just like I said, perfect time of day. Let's crop it in here. And the camera and the lens did a great job, better than last time. But sorry to say, guys, there's a huge learning curve. You're not going to go out and first day out and shoot killer shots, no matter if you're using the Z9, A1, R5, R3. There's a lot to get used to. If you're using a lens like this, it's not easy to capture these birds, especially birds in flight using a 600mm focal length. It takes a lot of practice and skill. Now, about focus modes. There's so many combinations you could use with a Nikon Z9, and I'm not even sure I'm doing things correctly. I'm using large area AF, switching into 3D autofocus. Is there better ways to do things? Of course there is. I'm not a birder, but I kind of got my way around the focus modes. Now, is there things that I wish Nikon would improve on that really needs work? Like, here's an example. I would focus on the bird and then the box would go to the water for no apparent reason. That needs to be fixed. Here I was having trouble focusing on the birds. The camera would have trouble focusing on the birds until I recomposed the shot and went back up. Now, the Z9 did this on occasion, not all the time, but sometimes it would, act a certain way. Now, does this mean the Sony A1 or the R3 have their flaws as well? I haven't tested those cameras out with that same exact lens type in these exact conditions. I'm not a birder. However, my experience with the Z9 doing these type of shots, I got a lot of shots in focus and the user experience was great. The camera was fast, and as you saw in these examples, it would stick to the eyeball and would track small subject better from last time. So, and one more thing, guys, get ready to waste a lot of time and go through a lot of images when shooting 20 frames per second when post-processing. Not fun. All right, guys, it's getting cold. I'm packing up right here, and it's time to get out of here. It was fun, and I learned a lot, and yeah, like I said, it's cold, the sun is setting. Hope you enjoyed this video. Rock and roll. Hey, what's good, guys? Vahagan here from Vahography. If you like more rockin' videos like this one, go ahead and check the videos on the screen and subscribe to this channel, Vahography. Rock and roll.